So, LJ, my first question for you is, how did you come up with the idea to do this podcast?
Well, first, I wanted to find another way to connect with the members of the Cedar Crest community. So I actually saw Colby from Clark Summit and Travis from Bryn Mawr started and had podcasts. And seeing that, I actually reached out to Travis, and I think it was late February of last year, like 2020, to see what he used, the platform, the equipment. And obviously, when the pandemic hit, everything kind of took a back seat. But when we decided to go ahead with launching the podcast, I wanted to use it as a recruiting tool first for the coaches. So I've started doing profiles with the two coaches so far, and felt like it would be a great way to get the podcast off the ground, and kind of lead it into other things moving forward. But we were in between a few names to name the podcast. Ultimately, we went with On the Wing, referring to like the Falcons wing, but also like on the wing of the court or the field, whatever sport that everyone would play. But right now, trying to get bi-weekly episodes out, sprinkling in some bonus episodes. Right now, with having coaches profiles bi-weekly, March is going to be Athletic Trainers Appreciation Month, and Cedar Crest has 2 athletic trainers. So doing a small piece on each of the athletic trainers at Cedar Crest to kind of fill in the off weeks of the podcast. And then once sporting events begin again, trying to do weekly pieces, talking about recaps from the previous week or weeks, depending on when I can get and create the podcast, highlight some of the coaches or student athletes that really stood out during that week, and then talk about the upcoming events. So kind of building a platform for itself now, and then hoping to lead it into something else bigger as we progress back into playing athletics.
Obviously, when we're doing kind of a podcast here with you and I, when I do my preparation, I send questions ahead of time. Obviously, you're doing it from with your different constituents. What are the preparation that you need, or what do you need to do in order to get these episodes together?
So right now, like I said, I'm interviewing members of the coaching staff. It takes about 4 to 5 days to complete the entirety of the process, but that's me being very meticulous in what I'm doing. First, once I select which coach comes to me saying they want to be highlighted, I dive into their bios and see what they've done, and at least what we have documented. And I'll look into their respective programs, whether they participated at a different institution, where they coached, to see what that website has on them. And then I send an email to the coaches, kind of like what we did for this today, with 3 to 5 questions about their athletic career when they were a student athlete, all the way from when they were a child, how they learned to play whatever sport they did, or if they played other sports as well, all the way up to getting recruited in high school and what their recruiting process was like, to being a college athlete and what that experience was for them as a student athlete at their institution. And then the second half of the episode is them talking about how they began their coaching career and getting to Cedar Crest. So exploring all those types of things, it gives them a chance to talk about themselves and maybe experiences that potential student athletes or their current student athletes don't really know about them. So that's something I'd like to touch on with the coaches. That way, like families, friends, whoever's going to view it, but also the student athletes are going to be like, wow, I didn't know this about my coach. We record over Zoom, same way we do. We'll get on, talk a couple minutes if they have any questions. I try to keep the interview as free flowing and easy as possible. I want it to be like a laid back conversation. That way they feel comfortable enough to have the conversation. But it's something I pride myself on, is let's have a conversation we can all just have fun with. It doesn't have to be very stringent. Just whatever we talk about is what we talk about. We have set questions, but that's not what we stick to. And then the bulk of the time for me is putting the podcast together in the back end. Like I said, the interview is the best part. It's easy once we're in the interview, but 4 to 5 days afterwards, I'll listen to the interview probably once or twice through before I touch it. So on my ride home, I'll put it on in my car. I'll listen to it when I get home. The next day, if and when I'm in the office, I'll start doing some rough edits, put that together. I cut the audio and video together in Adobe Premiere. So I link them together, because the first time I did a rough edit, I would cut the audio but not the video.
Yes.
and everything was offline. So that was a nightmare. But it was a learning experience. Thankfully, that wasn't the first episode I put out. Um, but after I go through the rough edit, I'll pick and choose things that I liked and didn't like, and then I finally put together the final edit. And then what I do is I ask the coaches to send me photos. So if they have photos of them as a college athlete or even younger or coaching at a different institution, sending those over. That way I have things to overlay over our faces. That way they're not staring at our face for anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes, depending
Right.
on however long the episode is. And once I'm happy with it, everything's edited. Um, I'll go through, I'll export it. We stream through Anchor. That's the platform we use. So we'll put it on Anchor. It distributes it to obviously Anchor, but Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and then we'll put it up on YouTube as well.
You referenced this earlier in the last question that I asked you about putting it together. What do you hope the listeners or the viewers that are watching the video, when they watch an episode, what do they come away with about Cedar Crest and its athletic program? What message do you want them to get?
Well, and I think I touched on this before. The main idea for me right now when I started it was being a recruiting tool for our coaches to use, because at the time they weren't able to go to events. So let's say if they have an athlete that may be on the fence or is interested, be like, hey, I was featured in this podcast. Take a listen. You can learn about me. Um, and that's something, like I said before, the coaches, they don't always get put in the forefront. So being able to tell their story and even how they were recruited, how that process was for them, makes them more relatable to the potential student athlete. Um, I understand most of our listeners are probably going to be friends and family of the staff and student athletes. Even alumni have reached out to me, and members of the Cedar Crest College community. The reception of the podcast has been going very well so far. I've had a
Great.
lot of people reach out and be like, this was a really cool point. Even the current student athletes, I know, I spoke with our basketball coach, Kristen Carrott. I hinted at with the trailer that she was actually a high school quarterback her freshman year
I noticed that.
before she played basketball, and just the reception of that little tidbit that probably she doesn't tell everyone, but just to put it to the forefront got people excited to maybe tune in a little more. So it's neat to see how people connect with the coach after that, and I'd like to do that once we start bringing on student athletes. But as far as the athletic program itself, Cedar Crest is a completely different place than when I came here in December of 2017. The growth of the programs have been amazing, and to share that with the community has been uplifting, to say the least. And I think they appreciate the type of coverage. I try my best to put Cedar Crest in the best light possible, whether that's adding commentary to like live stream events, like play by play, or even giving the student athletes a great environment that they're competing in, whether it's the PA announcing or music, anything like that, just to uplift the experience. And then stepping up social media is a huge thing. Now, adding the podcast is just a different medium to help our fans, family, whoever's going to be listening and follows the Falcons athletic programs. It's a huge plus.
My final question for you, LJ, is what makes Division III so unique?
I mean, there's so many things about Division III that you could take away from it, but I know, and I feel like people say this a lot. To me, it's the purest form of competition. Division III athletes aren't getting scholarships of any sort, so they're choosing a school that fits them, maybe not just athletically, but primarily for their academics. And especially at Cedar Crest, academics are the first thing on our student athletes' minds, which to me is a true student athlete. Working at two Division III institutions, Moravian College and now Cedar Crest, I've seen how dedicated the student athletes are towards their academics and athletic programs. But Cedar Crest has so many dedicated individuals in just our department alone in challenging fields of study, whether it's the nursing program or the student teaching program here. And on top of that, being able to be a student athlete and involved in other extracurricular groups is just incredible. So it's it's something that doesn't always get to happen at other divisions, and I'm not going to speak on behalf of any other divisions, but to balance a full class schedule, being a part of one or sometimes two athletic programs, with Cedar Crest having a lot of dual sport athletes with the addition of track and field and our swim and dive program, but being a member of at least one or two programs, and then being involved on campus in other groups or volunteering, and then still trying to have a social life, to me is incredible. And I commend our student athletes for being able to find a way to balance both the academics and athletic side of things. It's very inspiring.